in the previous chapters and in the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe explained how when the Shekhinah came down into this world, the Shekhinah was way, way too high to be manifested, to be, right, for us to be able to see the Shekhinah. Therefore, it had to go through many, many levels of clothing. It has to have layers of coverings over it, concealments. This way it'll be able to come into this world. Fine, and we explained how that Shekhinah is actually the Shekhinah, right? If the Shekhinah is so high, what could you have higher than the Shekhinah that could cover it and make it possible for us to see? So we Alter Rebbe is talking about Torah and mitzvahs, but mainly Torah, because Torah is Hashem's Chachma, so it's even higher than Shekhinah. And the question now is, if Shekhinah can't come down into the world on its own because it's so high, and you have to have a garment clothing it, then how could you have the Torah, which is even higher than the Shekhinah? So the answer is because Torah came down in a way that it was possible for us to understand it, right? We understand Torah, we learn Torah, and it's able to be comprehended, understood through human beings. Therefore, it's possible to come into this world. The Alter Rebbe continues, when the first Beis Hamikdash was still in existence, in the first Beis Hamikdash, the Arin and the Luchais, right, were in the Kach Kadashim, that's where the Shekhinah was. Shehi Malchus Atzilus. The Shekhinah is originally Malchus of Atzilus, which is the lowest level of Atzilus, which comes then into Bria, Yitzira, finally Asiya, going through each world. So the Shekhinah actually rested where? In the Luchis themselves. Fine. It was on a the revelation of the Shekhinah that was in the Luchis was on a much, much higher level than Migiluya Behecheles Kodesh HaKadashim Shelamayel B'Elam Yanim. So, as high as the Shekhinah was in the higher worlds, it was even much, much higher in the lowest world, in our physical world, in the Beis Hamikdash. So the question is, how is that possible? Right? The Beis Hamikdash is in a physical world. The Kodesh HaKadashim is a physical place. How could you have the Shekhinah there higher than it was originally in the world of Atzilus? So he says, Ki Aseres HaDibros in Klolos HaTorah Kula. For the Aseres HaDibros is like the whole entire Torah, pretty much. Yeah? And the Aseres HaDibros have all the mitzvahs in them. Even though it seems there's only 10 mitzvahs in them, each of those mitzvahs comprise of together all of 613 mitzvahs. The Nafki Migui Chachmeila Dileila Leila Ma'alma Diskaya. So the Torah, the Aseres HaDibros, where do they get their energy from? They get their energy from the original Chachma, Hashem's Chachma, which is the highest level, right? Fine. Now, how could this high level come down to physical stones, right? Stones are the most physical thing you can have. They don't move, they don't have any life. So how could that have happened? So it says, La yarda mi madrega madrega kader chishtat nustaylam is al delam azagashmi. Shekhinah did not come down in a physical way. Sorry, it didn't go through different levels, from one level to the next. No, it didn't do that. Because what would happen, that would make the level get more watered down, right? The lower something goes, normally the lower it gets, the more watered down it gets, and the less of the real essence you have left. Rather, what happened, it came down in its actual form. Hello. Hi, Avi. Hello, Avi. How are you?
Am I part of the raffle?
It's not, today we're not going to do a raffle for the Tanya. We're going to have a site the raffle later on in Mir Tashem.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're saying how this world, right? Everything works through nature in this world. But the haluchos were a godly thing. They weren't a physical thing. Physically we saw them, but their idea was a spiritual thing. And the writing as well, the engraving of the luchos was also a very godly thing. Which is higher than the nature of the world. So the luchos really gave energy to the entire world. But the luchos themselves weren't a physical thing. It was physical, you could touch it, but it wasn't something, its idea was a very, very spiritual thing. It was removed much higher than the world. Ella, right? The level of Chachma of Atzilus, which is pretty much the highest level we could think of, right? Because it's the highest level in the highest world. So, yeah, the Chachma of Atzilus enclosed itself in the lowest level of Atzilus, which is what? Malchus of Atzilus, and then from Malchus Datzil also went into Bria, to the Chabad, the Chachma, Bina of Bria, and so on and so forth. So those things alone, which is the Chachma of Atzilus, right, is really, the Chachma of Atzilus went into the Malchus of Atzilus, and then to the Malchus of Bria.
Zon Malchus Datzilus.
Well, Malchus Datzilus is the lower level of Atzilus, which eventually went into the Malchus of Bria, and then Yitzira, and so on and so forth. So basically, unlike anything else which goes through the regular process of one world to the next, I believe what it's saying, it's a little bit deeper today, but I believe what it's saying is that it kind of had like a jump. It basically went straight from there. It didn't go through all the lower worlds. It just went from the first top worlds, and it went straight into our world. So it's still a very, very spiritual level. Yeah? And where do we see miracles within the luchos themselves? The letters shlas mem, right, and the letters samach are like circles or like squares. Technically speaking, if I cut out a square, the middle of the square should fall out, right? That's how it should work. But what happened was the middle of the square, which was meant to fall out, actually floated there, and it was like it didn't, like it was just hovering. It just it didn't fall out of place. That was one miracle. Another miracle also is, from either way you look at the luchos, what happened was, whether you look at it from this side or from this side, the engravement was, you could read it the same way. So right now, if you could see the word chayenu, right? But if these words were engraved, and I turned it around, the words would be backwards. The ches would be backwards, both yud, the nun, and the vav. But by the luchos, they were both the same way. Either way you look at it, they were able to be read. U'ma'aseh lakim chaim, they were very, very godly things, the luchos. U'alma diskasi hamakana be'il mabriya kanei delei dechein. Right? Which is from the level of Alma Diskasi, which is much higher. It's basically the hidden worlds as opposed to the revealed worlds, which is a much, much higher level, which lives in Olam Habriya, right? Like it's known to Yodei Chein, those who know very, very high esoteric things. Anyways, so in short, what we're saying today is, the Shekhinah in our world was much, much higher than it was in the higher world, because in the higher world it went through different levels, but by us it came straight down. This is from what I understand, I could be wrong. It came pretty much straight down in a more direct manner, and therefore in the luchos themselves they are the Torah. So the whole garment of the Shekhinah was Torah, and where is the Torah on planet Earth? Where in the luchos, in the temple, in Kachay HaKadashim, in the base of Mikdash, and therefore that's where the highest revelation was, even higher than the highest worlds. Shkoyach Chevra for joining today's Tanya shiur.